Bedtime for Gus. Cinderella looked out her window. The sun was setting. In the distance, she could see the castle's clock. It read 8 o'clock. Cinderella tapped gently on the walls of her attic room. "Bedtime," she called. Jack, Susie, Gus, and the other mice hurried out of their mouse hole. Cinderella did all the household chores in her wicked stepmother's house. She never had time for fun, so the birds and mice were her only friends. "Bedtime already," Jack cried. Bedtime?" Gus asked. Gus was Cinderella's newest mouse friend. She had just rescued him from a trap that morning.
"Bedtime, Gus Gus. Close eyes and fall asleep,"
Susie explained. Gus looked confused. He closed his eyes and started to tip over. Jack caught him. "Not fall, Gus Gus," he said. "Fall asleep, like this." He put his head on his hands and pretended to snore. Cinderella laughed. "Falling asleep isn't all there is to bedtime," she said. "Gus has never lived in a house before. We'll have to teach him about getting ready for bed."
Okay,
the other mice cried.
show Gus Gus."
"First," Cinderella said, "you have to put on your pajamas." She went to a trunk and pulled out a tiny pair of striped pajamas for Gus. "Here, try these on." Soon they were all in their pajamas. Even Cinderella. "That's better," Cinderella declared. "Pajamas are much more comfortable for sleeping than regular clothes." Gus nodded. Gus loves pajamas," he explained. Gus wears pajamas all the time." Cinderella smiled. "I'm glad you like your pajamas, Gus, but they are only for while you're sleeping." The mouse nodded.
"Now sleep, Cinderella?"
Another mouse cried. Cinderella smiled. "Not quite yet," she said to the young mouse. "First, wash your face and brush your teeth. When you're all scrubbed and brushed, I'll kiss you goodnight, and then Susie will tuck everyone in." The mice began to brush their teeth. Gus said with a smile, tasting the minty toothpaste. The other mice giggled and finished up. Gus watched carefully. Before long, he was done too. Tuck in?" Gus asked. Jack pulled him toward the wash basin. "Not yet, Gus, he said. He handed him some soap. Gus looked puzzled, but he watched as the other mice washed their faces and patted themselves dry with old rags. Then he did the same thing. When the mice were all neat and clean, Cinderella kissed them goodnight. "It's time for everyone to go to sleep," she said sweetly. "Follow me," Jack told Gus. He ran to his little bed and hopped in. Then he pointed to the bed next to him. "That's your bed," he said. Gus grinned and got under the covers. Susie tucked in each of the mice.
"Story, Cinderella!"
the mice cried.
"Story!"
Cinderella smiled. "All right," she said. "Once upon a time, there was a young prince who lived in a beautiful castle. He had everything that money could buy: fine clothes, jewels, paintings, and more. But something was missing. He didn't have anyone special to love." Cinderella continued the story for a long time. Each time she tried to stop, the mice begged for more. After a while, they couldn't keep their eyes open anymore. It was just too late. When the last mouse had fallen asleep, Cinderella tiptoed to her own bed and climbed in, still thinking about her bedtime story. Dreaming up tales made her forget her life of chores, at least for a time. Just then, Gus began to snore. Cinderella giggled and pulled up her covers. She glanced once more at the clock on the castle tower. It read 11 o'clock. "Oh my," she murmured sleepily. "If the mice had their way, I'd be telling tales until midnight." Cinderella snuggled against her pillow and yawned. "If only some of my stories would come true," she added sleepily. As Cinderella closed her eyes, the birds began to sing a lullaby. Soon, Cinderella was fast asleep, dreaming that someday she'd meet a handsome prince and live happily ever after.